In this video, we'll discuss how neck thickness relates to constitutional strength and resiliency, as well as ideas to consider. Enjoy. In today's face reading tutorial, we're going to discuss something that we have not discussed in the past. And if I have talked about it, it's been very brief and we haven't done any kind of deep dive. So this is going to be pretty basic and pretty straightforward. But one of the areas of the face that we don't think about is what they call the foundation or the root of the face, which is actually the neck. So when we think about face reading, we're thinking about facial features, and that's very important because the structure of our bones on the face, the shape of our eyes, the shape of our nose, the plumpness of features, all these things tie into face reading. Now, you've also heard me talk about the ears, which technically aren't a facial feature, but they attach to the skull, and so the same kind of thinking applies here, that the neck is sort of the root system or the foundation from which the face sits on. So the neck. When we look at someone's neck, this tells us quite a bit about constitutional strength, muscular strength, and bodily resiliency. So the basic metrics are this. If we see a very skinny neck, a very narrow neck, where the neck abnormally looks smaller than it should, where everything is skinny, especially from profile, things just look kind of weak and deficient, this is not a favorable thing. This typically points to a discrepancy either in the Jing system or the Jing has been injured through bodily injury, maybe something like chemotherapy or long-standing disease, something where the Jing has really been impacted, or they just came in genetically a bit weaker. And that happens. It doesn't mean you can't live a good and healthy life. It just means that these are things you're going to have to shore up. So collectively, when the neck is thinner, there's going to be sort of, I would say, weakness and deficiency metrics that we need to pay attention to. Now, with that small neck also comes refinement and sensitivity. So while you lose some of the physical strength, there's also some things that say in the face reading theory that also there's a sensitivity and refinement. So things that are a bit more delicate can actually be more sensitive. And when they're more sensitive, you can feel and sense easier. So there's a sensitivity and an acuity that can come with that on an energetic level if the neck is a bit thinner. But you've got to be careful in the sense that if the neck is physically skinnier too, there's not a lot of resiliency in the skull and how the nervous system relates into the brain. So that means not a lot of physical contact. Be careful in martial arts, be careful in contact sports. And the physicality of how you use your body is something you're going to need to pay attention to. Now, just the opposite is true if a person has a very thick and wide neck. If a person has a very thick, robust neck, typically, this means there's an aptitude in the physical. They're going to have usually very strong body resiliency, typically going to be resilient in athletics. They're going to be resilient in terms of taking blows physically, and it also points to constitutional strength. So we have to think that the kidneys are the system that run the Jing system. That's where our constitutional essence resides, in the kidney system. It's the water element. But the tissues that relate with that are the bones. So when we think about that, the bones, the spinal cord is a big part of our Jing system and our water element system. The neck, and especially the cervical vertebrae as we get closer to the skull, that is the upper spine, which is basically the upper element of the water system. And if the muscles around that area are thick and broad, this points to sort of like a surplus of Jing energy that is actually filled into the flesh and the neck tissues, therefore kind of pointing to this resiliency and robustness in the Jing system. So keep these things in mind when you're looking at someone's face. Yes, pay attention to the features, pay attention to the ears, pay attention to all those things. But once you do that and you understand that, and you pay attention to all of those things, then what you're going to want to do is look at the neck and think about the constitutional resiliency and the Jing system that is supporting the skull. So a lot of times you'll see people with very robust bone structures also have very thick necks, and these are sort of just further indicative metrics that the Jing system is very strong. And if the Jing system is strong, that means you have the potential, if you play your cards right, to live a very long time because the body is strong and resilient. But the pitfall and the catch with people with strong Jing is, because they were so resilient, they can be very hard on their bodies, and they're not going to notice how rough they are on their bodies until it's too late. They hit like their 50s or 60s, and then shit hits the fan. So if you have a thick neck and you have good bone structure, just pay attention. It means you have good Jing, but be careful and mindful of how you tend to your energy, because you're sitting on a winning lottery ticket. But a lot of times people who have strong Jing and who have thick necks overuse their energy and can actually get sick faster. All right, y'all. Take care.